What's up? What's up? What's up, everybody? We are live. I pray all is well with you all. Thank you for coming to Language Barriers Convos with Concepts, episode 2. So it's just a time to listen, learn, love, and act to help initiate change in society, rethink the way that we see the world, address the racial tensions in society, and ultimately grow together. I wanted to particularly create a space to have healthy conversation and to help reshape the African American narrative. So I again re-released a song from my project, The Exchange Student, called Language Barriers, which speaks to the racial climate that we're dealing with right now. I have a music video out right now. You guys should check it out. It's on YouTube, and the link is below. But today we have a special guest, and he's an incredible artist, graphic designer, hailing all the way from Houston, Texas, a comic strip creator. Please welcome my good friend, Greg.
Hey, how's it going, man?
What's up, my guy? How are you?
I'm doing good.
Excellent, man. Well, again, just thank you for coming on. Just being a part of progressive discussion and conversation, just to kind of help with the movement. And again, just thank you for just taking the time out today.
Yeah. No, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, man. So, real quick, for the people that may not know you, tell us a little bit more about yourself, what you do, and anything else you want to share, just as a quick intro.
All right. So my name's Greg. I met you in at Drexel University. I'm from Houston, but I was able to go up to Drexel on scholarship, and that's where we met. We met in the immersion program, for a scholarship. Spent 3 weeks of summer, like just going crazy.
Intense, man.
It was intense. I graduated from Drexel with a degree in graphic design. Moved back to Houston because I really wanted to make my career here. In my home, and some of the stuff that I learned and experienced in Philly, I wanted to be able to bring it, back home and try and make a difference here. By day, I'm a graphic designer for a small woman-owned environmental and public involvement firm.
Nice.
By night, I'm a nerd. I spend a lot of time just drawing, doodling, working on my own comics. Never getting any of them quite done the way that I want them to be, which is always it's one of those things, with being an artist, nothing is ever truly done,
Yeah.
And so you have to draw a line under it somewhere, you can never, and it's always hard to just say this is good enough. Other than that, I'm just spending time watching cartoons. Okay. I'm telling you, I just really am just like a huge nerd. So
I love it, man. Nothing wrong with it. Nothing wrong at all. I just saw at Walmart, like they now sell the arcade machine type stuff. So it's just like new to me. So like I always loved Ninja Turtles, grew up on all the DVDs, all that stuff. So it's like I'm just a nerd with like cartoons, old school comic type of stuff. So I'm with you the whole way, man. I love it. But to try to make some type of connection. So overall, I had reached out recently, and you can kind of help it, further expand the story. But I reached out recently to try to get some graphic work done because you are an incredible artist, and I always, for some time, had seen your drawings and just the way you see art and do art. And I was like, yo, this would be really dope just to see if we can try to get you on to do the single cover. So just kind of, explain that process and kind of how you came up with it. Cause it's like right at the bottom of the screen here.
Yeah, right there.
Yeah.
So really you came to me, you kind of had an idea already of what you want. And that's always the best thing whenever you get any kind of client, is as long as somebody knows what they want or has some idea of what they want, that's always great. I've had so many clients over time who have just been like, well, just make something pretty, It's just like you can figure it out, right?
It doesn't really help me much, right?
But I know when you came to me, you wanted to have, a black person and a white person, separated by glass and talking to each other but not understanding,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and then you gave me the song, and I went ahead, I listened to it,
Yeah.
um and a large part, first off, I think we all know that this a large part of this came, the big culmination of everything was like the death of George Floyd.
Oh, yep. Yep.
But even in the lead up to that, you had Amon Arbery, um Breonna Taylor.
Taylor. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
there was, God, and it's sad because it's like there was so many. There was another person that was before that even. It was like 3 or 4 in a row.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was already on top of the COVID stuff happening and everything.
Right.
And it's like when you reached out to me, it's like I was like down in the pits of despair,
Wow.
Everything was really, like, I was in a pretty bad place because we were also like on top of all that, I was under like 4 major deadlines for work,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and I just sat there. I was just like, man, how am I going to do this? But it's like, I remember, the thing that I remember about you was how positive you were
Wow.
all the time. I was just like, I gotta help this guy out. It's like, how am I gonna pass up this opportunity? And the hardest thing for me was that I didn't know what kind of voice I could have around these issues,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because like for a few years I was really struggling in terms of what to say. So when you came to me, you had your idea, um, I said, okay, well, how can I relate this to, what you said is that you want to have the white guy and the black guy talking through the piece of glass,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and having them not understand each other.
Right.
Um, the way I ended up relating that was, and I was telling you a little bit about this, is that, turn back the clock to about 2015, or no, not 2015, like 2016 or 2017,
Mm-hmm.
when Charlottesville happened.
Right.
I was having a conversation with my 2 best friends from high school. And these are guys that I've known, I mean, one of them I've known since middle school, like I've
Right.
known these guys for a long time. And
Mm-hmm.
I remember telling them during that conversation, I said something along the lines of like, I can't believe this is happening in this day and age in this country. And one of them shot right back and was just like, what are you talking about? Like, this has been going on all the time.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
just know it, and it it shocked me at that moment because, again, like, one of these, I've known them for such a long time, like close to like 20 years or something at this point.
Wow.
And at that moment, it's like everything, I felt like I was a complete stranger to them.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, I have no clue what y'all lived through your whole lives,
Mm-hmm.
you know? And it really, I mean, it literally like flipped me on my head,
Yeah.
Um, which, I mean, that's kind of what you see in the cover, it's kind of that moment where it's just kind of like, I have no idea what you've gone through.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
that's it was that energy that I tried to bring and just express. That's what I was putting into the cover itself.
Yeah. Yep. Yep. Yep.
Um,
And even just to kind of like add on to that, from a lot of people that I've talked to, it's just like people of color and even just white people is just literally living 2 different worlds. It's like
oh
we
yeah,
experience a totally different United States than of white dominant culture, so it's
oh,
like kind of when I see the cover and I see it flipped upside down, it's just like our worlds are completely different. We see the world in different lenses. It's just like, it's kind of crazy just the kind of way you painted that picture.
oh yeah. I really wanted I definitely really wanted the thing that I like about it is that you can invert the cover, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Like you can look at it in both ways, you know? So it does give each person a chance to have like their own perspective on it, you
Right.
know?
Yep.
But
Yep.
yeah, like it is totally different. I mean, there are other white friends of mine who are fairly progressive, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I've heard them say they were just kind of like, you know, I thought when we elected Obama, you know, we got through all this. And it's just kind of like, and even I had bought into that narrative a little bit. The only thing that held me back is, again, you know, one of these friends, you know, after Obama got elected in 2008, you know, he told me, you know, he explained to me that his own grandfather didn't think that he was even going to make it to being inaugurated, you know?
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
exactly. So it's like so that, you know, that at least gave me some insight then.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, it's like you had like this perspective, even, no matter how progressive you might have been at the time, you had this perspective that, okay, well, we're moving forward. You know, you had this optimistic view of like, well, we're moving forward. You know, we're eventually going to get get to this place where it's like everything's going to be, you know, everything's going to be right and
Mm-hmm.
fair and just. But it's just become clear, you know, as case after case after case after case that no, there's a lot of issues.
Yeah.
I mean, God, I mean, think about, you know, growing up in Texas, you know, it's like I knew about Juneteenth,
Mm-hmm.
you know, but I didn't know about Black Wall Street, you
Yeah.
know.
Hearing a lot
And
about
I didn't
that.
learn about that until, you know, I didn't learn about that until after college. You know?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
And it's kind of like what I was saying in the last episode, is where it's kind of like we have to do a rewriting of history in a way, or like really digging through other resources to get a bigger picture or a fuller narrative on what Black people actually contributed to society.
oh
And
yeah, for sure.
it's just like it's literally woven into the fabric of America. Well, it's white supremacy could even really be woven into the fabric of America, and then just kind of neglected all the other stuff. It's like all Black history sometimes is, oh, slavery. You know what I mean? And it's just like, it's just unfortunate, you know?
Yeah, exactly. It's one of those things that like I feel like what happens so often is that, you know, it's like as a white person, it's like you go through this where it's like you spent like your whole childhood growing up and it's like, oh, well, you get exposed to all this stuff during Black History Month and you learn about Martin Luther King. In my case, in third grade, I did get to learn about Malcolm X
Okay.
because I had a Black third grade teacher who was willing to teach us about Malcolm X.
Mm-hmm,
You
mm-hmm.
know, you know, you learn about Booker T. Washington. You learn about like, you know, you learn about Washington Carver and all, you know, all these other like, you learn about the, for lack of a better word, noble figures, you know, and you do learn about the Civil War, but you don't learn about this tougher history about, you know, about these, you know, you don't learn about, again, you don't learn about Black Wall Street. You don't learn about the history of the Black settlement that was in Central Park that got eminent domain, you know, and cleared out, you
Right.
know, in order to
Right.
build the park. You know, there's just a lot that doesn't get covered.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, it's just it's one of those things. It's like you have to learn to people have to learn to accept the fact that like just because this country is imperfect and has an imperfect past
Mm-hmm.
doesn't mean you can't love it all the same, you know.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep, yep, yep. So when you just think about, you know, even going back to the cover and then the song in general, like what did you you know, well, one, completing the cover, kind of like what kind of feelings did you have, you know,
Yeah,
after
so
it's all said and done, and then even listening to the song while making the cover, it's just like kind of what kind of emotions, what kind of feeling are you having, like what can you kind of contribute to everything that's going on when you
well, so I think ultimately the goal of your song is to get us to someplace positive, you know,
Mhm.
to get us to have a conversation
Right.
and get a conversation started on things, you know.
Yep. Yep.
Um, and I think that a large part of what you're trying to cover is that it's the idea that getting people in the same place and talking, you know, so that you can understand each other and
Right.
understand that some of these issues are more complicated than you know just the simple than just simple black white, which
Sure.
brings us back to actually brings us back to the cover design. So
Hmm.
I tried to get so again it's like I tried to do this sharp contrast between the characters, you know.
Hmm.
One of the things that I wanted to capture, it's funny, you know, drawing the characters themselves wasn't that hard. The one thing that I wish I had done in the process of doing it is that I should have asked you, you know, I kind of like Instagram stalked you a little bit just to get an image of how to draw you. What I should have done is I should have just come out straight out and said, "Hey, give me a most recent photo," you know,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
because I knew that you had like the dreads, you know, but
Hmm.
I didn't realize that you had gotten them so long that you were doing them back in the ponytail.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I wish I had done that, but I still feel like it looks good, you know.
No, man, I love it. It's like
Yeah.
that's my look. That's the Killmonger look. That's what I was trying to
Oh
even. That's why
yeah,
I
yeah,
watched it in the first place.
exactly. Yeah, no, I totally got that. I loved it. So I got that for the white guy. I got to a point where I was just kind of like, all right, well, standard white guy hair, just like short and everything, but the next hardest part was just getting the backgrounds because what I
Mhm.
wanted to do, if you're familiar with the artist Mark Rothko, you know,
Okay.
he's a real minimalist artist. But what he did was he was an abstract expressionist, and what he did is he really worked with just large fields of color and just trying to layer upon layer upon layer on these colors, you know,
Mhm.
where it's like if you look at it from a distance, you're just kind of like, oh, well, that's just a big black canvas, you know,
Mhm.
or a big green canvas or whatever. When you step up closer, you can see like these subtleties
Yeah.
of differences and everything. And I was trying to kind of get a little bit of that effect in the background, you know, and you can see it when you look at the album art in full detail. You can see like I sat there and I painted, you know, for the black background, I painted like a red, and
Mhm.
then you know I tried painting blue over that, and then I tried painting orange and green, and you know trying to layer the color.
Yep. Yep.
And I wanted to do that to kind of express a greater level of depth on both sides of the thing, you know, because it's like I've encountered people in the past who, you know, will say real questionable things, you know,
Sure.
and they'll think that, you know, it's that whole thing. It's just like, well, nobody's ever told me that this is offensive before,
Sure.
you
Yep.
know, but really it's just kind of like, or I think I'm coming from a good place by saying this, but actually, no, it's kind of not, you know.
It's just ignorance at the end of the
Yeah,
day. Yeah.
exactly. It's like wanting to have good intentions with things, but really you're trying to, but really you're not getting how it's being perceived on the other side, you
Sure.
know.
For sure. Yep. Yep.
So, like ultimately, I really do believe that the vast majority of people are well intentioned,
Mhm.
but you know, it just comes down to a level of understanding, you
Yeah.
know. So.
Absolutely. And it's like just even about the album cover or the single cover, I
Yeah.
noticed it's like so the the black guy, he has like the a white white background, and then the white guy black background, and then just that contrast. It's like illumination, still confused in darkness.
Yeah. I also thought there was a lot of that too. I mean, the white guy, it's like, again, it gets back to kind of like where my own mental state was. It's like I did feel like I was kind of in a, it's like you feel like you're sitting on the sidelines, and sometimes it's hard to feel like you know what to do, and that can put you in a pretty dark place, So
that's good, man. I love it. Well, did you have anything else to share? I know, like, I was trying to stay around the 20-30 minute mark. Did you have any? I'm trying to think, was there anything else? Just kind of like, if you can just touch on real quick, just growing up and your experiences, maybe even in middle school and high school, just kind of to close up and wrap up. And anything that you can kind of share to encourage people, to kind of help change their thought process, maybe kind of how you got to where you are right now.
Yeah, I'll try my best to keep this brief. I told you I can tend to ramble, right?
No, you're fine.
Yeah. Growing up, so I went to an elementary school that was it was fairly diverse. It felt like it was a pretty diverse mix of white, Hispanic, Black, Asian, Middle school, I went to middle school in a more affluent neighborhood, a lot more white people, a lot more upper middle class, rich people. High school, I went to Booker T. Washington. Now, the history of Booker T here in Houston is that prior to Brown versus Board of Education, it was known as the Black High School in Houston. It was like, that's literally what it was, And then after segregation, there's a long history of how Houston went about segregation. What they did is they set up a magnet program where the idea is that you put these specialty programs, or special training programs in different schools to attract students from other neighborhoods, like a magnet.
Okay.
So at Booker T, we were the high school for engineering professions. Now, granted, even with that, at the time that I went there, it was 80%. It was an 80% Black school, So that meant that I had a lot of Black friends growing up, and I knew, I had experience. Whenever I would bring them over to my mostly white neighborhood, the Citizens Patrol would always drive by a little bit slower by our driveway, when we were out doing stuff. So it's like, it's one of those things. It's like, I thought I had an understanding about all this, but even then, it took up until a few years ago for me to see and understand that there was more that I wasn't seeing. In terms of getting people to have a positive conversation around all this, best thing that I can say is meet people where they are,
Right.
Get on their level. Like, if I'm, again, I grew up in a city of 2 million people. My dad grew up in a town of like 10,000,
Yep.
Like, if I go back to his town, and I try and relate things in terms that I understand, it's not necessarily going to get across,
Right.
You got to think about it in terms of somebody else, the terms that somebody else will understand. So, and that takes patience, sometimes it takes asking a lot of questions, and sitting and listening to those questions, listening to their answers to those questions, rather than instantly responding and just saying, well, what about this? And what about that? It's just like, and you should really think this. No, like, just sit back, listen, see where they're coming from.
Right.
And more often than not, if all you do is sit there and ask questions, follow like the Socratic method, and you do it in a well-reasoned manner, they're going to talk themselves into a corner. And eventually, once they get to that spot, they're going to they're going to realize, well, maybe I don't understand this as well as I do.
Right.
You know? So, and once you get them there, that's their start line. You know,
Mm-hmm.
you got to get them to their start line so that they can then take their journey, you know, on discovering race disparity and whatnot in America. So,
Man, that's good, man. And just even comment back on that, it's just like we have to be in constant communication with
oh yeah,
people who don't look like us, talk like us, think like us, act like us. Like
oh yeah,
we're always in our same circles. We'll never expand to even want to grow. You know, like we kind of have the same people talking in our ears, and we don't ever get other perspectives and ideas and whatever. So I just applaud you for even, you know, one, just even coming on to do something like this, and you know, being an ally, being in constant communication with people, making friends that don't look like you to help further the conversation, man. So
yeah.
I applaud you. Thank you so much for even being on and you know, sharing your story. Truly appreciate it.
And hey man, thank you for having me. I
Yes,
appreciate
sir.
it.
Yes, sir. And thank you for the dope cover. Again, everybody, check him out.
Great.
You know, on Instagram. And if you know, he's always taking good, you know, some freelance stuff too. So definitely check him out. He's an incredible graphic designer. Support him if you can, and definitely check out the song. Again, it's on iTunes, Spotify, you know, Google Play, anywhere you see. The link is there as well as the music video. So again, thank you guys for just coming on, and thank you, Greg, for taking your time out. Appreciate you.
All right, thanks, man. You have a good one.
You too. Peace, guys.
All right.